I still remember the glow of the streetlights that night, warm, honey-colored halos smudging against the darkness as we walked home side by side. My fingers were tucked in the pocket of his jacket, his hand wrapped around mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. It was natural. Everything with him had always felt that way. Soft. Steady. Familiar in a way that scared me the moment I started to notice it. We had just watched some mediocre action movie he insisted I'd like. I pretended I did, mostly because I liked the way he kept glancing over at me during the loud scenes, checking if I was okay with the explosions. The funny part is, I wasn't even watching the movie. I was watching him. Watching the little crease between his brows relax when he laughed. Watching the way he always shifted the bucket of popcorn closer to me. Watching him try to act uninterested when I leaned on his shoulder, even though I could feel the way his breath stumbled. Sometimes I wonder if he ever realized how much I adored him even then. When we reached the front steps of my apartment, everything felt wrapped in the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're standing inside a snow globe. Contained. Still. Safe. He stood there, rocking slightly on his heels, like he was holding something behind his teeth. I thought he was going to tell me some stupid joke. He had this habit of delivering punchlines with absolutely no warning, but instead, he took this tiny breath, one that seemed to shake through him before he steadied it. And then he said it. Softly. Honestly. Without hesitation. I love you. Time didn't stop. My heart did. Not in a swoony romantic way. In an oh God, what do I do way? I felt everything at once, warmth flooding my chest, fear crawling up my throat, an ache I couldn't name. It wasn't that I didn't love him. That was the problem. I did. I loved him in the way you love the sunrise when you're afraid of the dark. In the way you love a soft blanket after years of sleeping cold. In the way you love someone who doesn't even know they've been stitching your broken pieces back together just by showing up every day. But the words, I couldn't push them out. My mouth felt sealed shut by every childhood memory of love that ended badly. Every fight I heard through the walls. Every I love you I'd learned to mistrust. So I did the worst possible thing. I smiled. Weakly. Too quickly. Hugged him with shaky arms. And whispered, "Thank you." The second the words left me, I felt something inside him pull back. Not visibly, not dramatically. Just a microscopic shift, like a string had snapped between us, soundlessly. He didn't say anything. He just hugged me a little too gently, like I might break apart if he held on any tighter. And when he pulled away, he gave me a small smile. The kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. The kind that tried too hard to reassure me, tried too hard to reassure himself. "Good night," he said. I watched him walk down the street until he turned the corner. My chest felt tight, too tight, like I had swallowed a stone whole. I thought the moment would fade by morning, washed away by routine and comfort. But it didn't. It echoed. And it was only the beginning of the shift I didn't realize I'd just caused. A shift that, over the next few days, would unravel everything I thought was steady between us. The shift didn't show itself all at once. It wasn't dramatic or obvious. It was quieter than that, like dust collecting on a shelf, slow and easy to ignore until one day it smothers the shine. The next morning, he still texted me good morning. He still asked if I'd slept well. He still sent a picture of his ridiculous cereal. He always made these lopsided smiley faces out of blueberries, like a child feeding another child. But the tone was different. Before, his messages were like warm hands on my cheeks, soft, playful, unfiltered. Now they felt carefully arranged, like he was laying out words on a tray, choosing each one with tweezers. I noticed it. Of course I noticed it. But I told myself I was imagining things. People have off days. People get tired. People get quiet. I repeated that to myself while I got ready for my shift at the bookstore cafe. I repeated it while I tied my apron and greeted customers and made cappuccinos with hearts that looked more like deflated lungs. Around noon, he usually called me during his lunch break. That day, he didn't. I stared at my phone more than I looked at the register. Every time it buzzed, my pulse jumped. A notification. A customer review email. A sale. A weather alert. Everything except him. When his name finally appeared around 2 p.m., It was just a text. Hope you're having an okay day. Okay. Not good. Not great. Not missing you. Not the usual string of emojis that made no sense. Just, okay. I typed back something too long, too enthusiastic, too desperate to fill the space I felt growing between us. He responded with a thumbs up and said he had to get back to work. A thumbs up. He'd never used that with me. Not once. It felt like a substitute for affection. A placeholder for words he didn't feel safe saying anymore. The day dragged. Every latte felt heavier than the one before. By closing, I was exhausted from work, from overthinking, from pretending I wasn't panicking. He usually walked me home on days when our schedules lined up. That night, he texted, "I'm going to stay late at the office. Rain check. Rain check." We'd never needed a rain check. I walked home alone under flickering streetlights, past the little convenience store he always dragged me into to buy gum we never finished. Past the bench where he once insisted we sit for exactly 73 seconds because he liked the way the light hit my cheek. Everything felt familiar and foreign at the same time. And I kept hearing that moment replay in my head. I love you. Thank you. The word sat in my stomach like regret that hadn't fully become regret yet, but was definitely on its way. When I got home, my apartment felt too quiet, too still. I showered, sat on my bed, wrapped myself in a hoodie that smelled like him, and waited for a message that didn't come. By midnight, I realized he wasn't punishing me. He was afraid. Afraid of pushing me. Afraid of being too much. Afraid that the love he offered so easily had made him look foolish. And somehow, because of me, he was shrinking into himself. Still, I told myself tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow had to be better. But tomorrow didn't bring clarity. It brought something else. Something that would tighten the invisible space between us until it hurt. Tomorrow wasn't better. It wasn't worse either. It was something more confusing, something in between, a kind of emotional limbo where everything looked the same, but felt undeniably different. He still showed up. Still texted. Still smiled. But everything was muted. Like someone had lowered the volume on him. We met for coffee after my shift, which used to be our favorite part of the week. He'd always greet me with this half-hug, half-twirl thing that embarrassed me in public and made heat crawl up my neck. But that day, he waved. A polite, distant wave. And when I reached him, when I leaned in to hug him, his hands rested on my arms instead of wrapping around me. Soft. Brief. Careful. He was always careful, but never like this. We sat in our usual spot by the window, but even the light felt wrong. It used to paint warm streaks across his face, making him look golden, almost angelic. Today that same light made him look tired. He asked about work. Asked if my manager was still stealing customers' tips. Asked if my coworker Ava still played depressing acoustic covers of pop songs in the back room. But he never once asked how I was doing. Not really. It was small talk tied with a pretty bow, pleasant, safe, detached. I tried to break the surface. You okay? I asked quietly. He looked up from his cup, startled. He blinked once, then shook his head lightly. Yeah, I'm fine. Just, long week. He smiled, but the corners of his mouth barely lifted. There it was again. The version of him that existed when he was trying too hard to look unbothered. I recognized it immediately. Because it was the same version of me he'd encountered the night I said, "Thank you," instead of "I love you." We kept talking about his office drama, my broken espresso machine, the weather turning weirdly warm for winter, but under the surface, something stretched thinner and thinner. At one point, our fingers brushed when we both reached for sugar packets. He pulled his hand back like he'd been caught stealing something. My heart tightened. He never recoiled from me. Not until now. Not until that moment rewrote the way he moved around me. And it made me panic in a way I hadn't expected. I wanted to tell him. Right then. Right there. I wanted to say, "I love you too." I was scared. I'm still scared. But I love you. The words rose up my chest like a tide. But when I opened my mouth, I saw the caution in his eyes. A hesitation. A waiting. A fear of hearing something that would hurt him again. And suddenly, the words lodged back in my throat. I chickened out. Again. When we parted ways outside the cafe, he hugged me. But this time, it felt like a formality, a gesture he offered because it was routine, not because he wanted to pull me close. "I'll text you later," he said. He did. Hours later. Short replies. Punctuated. Restrained. Over the next few days, everything continued like this, normal on the surface, painful underneath. We still met, still talked, still existed in each other's lives. But we were orbiting, not touching. Parallel. Never quite meeting in the middle. Until Friday night. That's when everything finally cracked. He sent one message, just one, that knocked the breath out of me. "Maybe we should take a little space. I don't want to pressure you." Pressure. Was that what he thought he'd been? Was that what my silence had made him believe? My fingers trembled over the screen, but I couldn't form a response. All I could think was, this wasn't space. This was drifting. And I was the one who started the current. I stared at his message for so long the screen dimmed twice. My reflection stared back at me in the dark glass, tired eyes, messy hair, and a face I barely recognized because of the weight resting on it. "Maybe we should take a little space. I don't want to pressure you." Pressure. The word dug under my skin. He had never pressured me. Not once. If anything, he was the safest part of my life. The softest. The most patient. But my silence, my fear, had twisted that patience into something else entirely. Something painful. I typed and deleted a dozen replies. Everything sounded wrong. "I'm not pressured." Too defensive. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Too vague. "I love you." Too late. In the end, I sent nothing. Not because I didn't want to. Because I didn't trust myself not to make everything worse. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, knees pulled to my chest, listening to the rain start tapping against the window like impatient fingers. I hated nights like this, quiet, heavy, the kind where your thoughts echo louder than anything outside. I replayed the moment. His eyes. His voice. The way his face changed when I said, "Thank you." And then I saw the last few weeks for what they were. He hadn't been pulling back because he stopped loving me. He'd been pulling back because he thought I was pulling back. Because he thought he was loving me too much, too loudly, too openly. He thought he scared me away. And the worst part was, I let him believe that. My chest tightened until it hurt. My breath shortened. My hand shook. It felt like grief, even though nothing had officially ended. But the distance between us felt like a living thing now, something solid, something cold. I grabbed my phone again. Still no new messages from him. Fine. If he wouldn't reach out, I would. I threw on jeans, a hoodie, didn't bother with makeup, and rushed out into the hallway. By the time I stepped outside, the rain had turned steady, soaking through my clothes in seconds. I didn't care. I walked, then jogged, then ran. Past the lamppost where he once fixed my scarf because he said I'd catch a throat cold and die dramatically. Past the little laundromat where we got stuck during a storm and danced to some old song playing from the vending machine. Past every memory that reminded me what I stood to lose. By the time I reached his building, I was drenched. Water dripped down my hair, into my sleeves, down my spine. My shoes squelched. I buzzed his apartment. No response. I buzzed again. Still nothing. My heart dropped until I heard footsteps rushing down the stairs. The door swung open, and there he was. His hair messy, shirt wrinkled, socks unmatched. He looked like he'd been pacing. Worried. When he saw me soaked, shaking, breathless, his eyes widened with pure panic. "Are you crazy?" he whispered. "You're freezing, come inside." But I stepped back, shaking my head. "No, not yet." My voice cracked. "I need to say something first." Rainwater streamed down my cheeks, and for once, I didn't care if he could see how much I was unraveling. His expression softened, but he stayed quiet. He didn't try to fill the silence. He didn't try to protect himself with distance this time. He waited. And suddenly, the words I had swallowed for weeks, burst out of me like they'd been waiting for this exact moment. "I love you." My voice trembled. "I've loved you for a long time." I was scared. I didn't grow up hearing those words. I didn't know how to say them without feeling like I was dropping something fragile. But I do. I love you. I've always loved you. I took a shaky breath. And I'm so sorry I made you think I didn't. He blinked once. Twice. The rain filled the silence between us. Then, very slowly, his shoulders dropped, like someone had just unhooked the weight he'd been carrying for weeks. He stepped toward me. Gently. Carefully. But not cautiously, like he was choosing to believe me, choosing to trust me. He reached out and touched my cheek with rain-chilled fingers. You have no idea, he whispered, voice unsteady, how long I've been waiting to hear that. My breath caught. But before I could respond, he said something that shattered me in the best way. I never wanted space from you. I just didn't want to push you away by loving you too much. A quiet sob escaped me, and I leaned into his palm. We stood there in the rain, hearts finally beating in sync again. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. But that wasn't the end. Because the real healing, the real warmth, came after he took my hand and said softly, "Come inside. Let's start over." And I followed him in, dripping water on the floor, somehow lighter than I'd felt in months. His apartment smelled like him, fresh laundry, cardamom, and something I could never name, but always missed the moment I left. He handed me a towel, then another when the first one became useless against how soaked I was. My teeth chattered as he guided me to the couch, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back, like he was afraid I'd slip away again. He made hot chocolate, the way he always did it, with too much cocoa and a marshmallow he pretended not to like, but always added for me. He sat beside me, legs folded under him, watching me with the softness of someone who had been holding his breath for weeks. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "Say it again." I swallowed. My pulse buzzed against my ribs. This time, the words didn't feel like a cliff. "I love you," I whispered. His eyes fluttered shut, like hearing it physically eased something inside him. When he opened them, his voice was barely there. "Can you tell me why?" It wasn't insecurity. It wasn't fishing for reassurance. It was the honest request of someone who had loved so fully and been met with silence. Someone who needed to understand that it wasn't blindness or pity or guilt, that it was real. So I told him. I told him I loved the way he laughed at his own jokes before finishing them. I loved how he always texted me, "Are you alive?" when I told him I was napping. How he noticed my favorite mug even when I didn't. How he remembered tiny things about me, things I forgot about myself. I loved how he loved, not loudly, not desperately, but with this steady warmth that made the rest of the world feel less sharp. I told him I loved him quietly at first, then loudly now. Not in a movie way. In a real way. The kind that shows up even when you're tired. Even when it's inconvenient. Even when it scares you. His eyes were glassy when I finished. Not crying. Just full. He ran his thumb over my knuckles, slow and reverent. "You didn't ruin anything," he said softly. "I just didn't know if you still wanted me the same way." "I did," I whispered. "I do." He let out a breath that trembled at the end. "I'm glad you came tonight," he said. "I was trying so hard to be respectful that I think I ended up pushing you away instead. And I was trying so hard not to scare you that I ended up hurting you anyway." A small laugh escaped him, gentle, tired, relieved. "Maybe we're both idiots." "Maybe," I said, leaning my shoulder into his. "Idiots who love each other." He smiled then, the real one, the one with the little dimple in his left cheek, the one that made his eyes crinkle and his whole face brighten like he'd swallowed a star. He took my hand and tugged me closer until my head rested on his chest. His heartbeat was steady, warm, sure. I let mine fall into rhythm with it. For once, there was no fear. Just presence. Just him. We talked until the rain softened. Talked about everything and nothing. About our week, his coworkers, my customers, the future. Not in grand gestures, just simple, honest possibilities. At one point, he brushed a strand of wet hair away from my face and asked, "Will you tell me you love me again tomorrow?" "Yes." "And the day after?" "Yes." "And the day after that?" I laughed. "You planning to request it daily?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. And I realized I didn't mind. Not even a little. Because for the first time in my life, saying "I love you" didn't feel like jumping off a cliff. It felt like stepping into a home I'd always known but never had the courage to enter. The next morning, when sunlight crept through his curtains and warmed the room, he opened his eyes, looked at me with that sleepy grin, and murmured, "Morning." Then, softer, "I love you." And without a heartbeat of hesitation, I answered, "I love you more." Like and subscribe for more.